Hi, welcome to Matt Holman Golf. I found some really good footage here of David Duval. So on the left-hand side, I think was around 2000 when he was sort of at his peak there. He's obviously got to world's number one. He won his major in 2001. He shot 59 in that period as well. And then sort of after that, he tried to make some changes to his swing. And he just never really got it back past that point. He kept trying to work away at it. So on the right hand side is about 205, 206, and this was when he was at the Leadbetter Academy. I think at this point he'd gone through a number of coaches sort of trying to find his game again. I know they were really talked about, they worked on trying to get the club face closed again and just really go back to what he used to do. Definitely in my own coaching, I'm not seeing a strong correlation between the better the swinger, the better the player. I think good technique makes a repeatable ball flight more likely to occur, but certainly doesn't guarantee it. So I think really in David's case, he always had good technique with some sort of idiosyncratic movements. Really for him it was about trying to go back to what he used to do, and that's certainly something in my teaching. I try and find footage of a player when they're playing their best golf, and even if the move seems unusual or unorthodox, we just get them back in that place, and it's amazing. All of a sudden their feelings will come back, their ball flight will come back, and sometimes it's sort of slightly contradictory to my beliefs even in a golf swing, but that's where they're most comfortable and they play their best golf. So we can start on the left hand side here. So he's definitely a little slimmer on the left hand side. I think setup wise, not too different. I think he's a little bit further away on the right hand side. You can see he's just reaching fractionally more for the ball. Definitely in terms of the first movement, when I looked at these swings to do this analysis, his arms and his club to me seemed more on plane, more in front of his body on the left hand side. So if we look on the right hand side here, the club is definitely working a little bit more under plane. So this was the first thing that stood out to me. Also, Dave's definitely a shut to open club face player, but if we analyse the club face positions at this point, one, you can see the clubs is definitely more under plane, and two, to me actually at that point it's just a few degrees more closed. I mean, maybe that's where the club head is a little bit more under plane, gives that illusion, but definitely first thing is that the club head is more behind his hands there in takeaway. So now continued on, I think if we now on the left hand side, see if we can see any difference through the sort of the set move. I think through here relatively similar. Definitely, so again, what stood out to me was the club face at this point compared to on the right hand side. On the left is just a few degrees more open. So looking at this, it definitely looks from the right hand side, take away into set, the club head was a little bit more in line relative to his hands and a little bit more open through the sort of halfway back phase, and through this phase as well. He's definitely more club face, sort of looking back at the camera, than in this frame here. The other thing that then really stood out to me, and I always noticed this in David's career, how the club head relative to his hands, if we look at its club head, so if we look at his foot line, I would say is, that's where he's aligned there. You can see the shaft is very much pointing off to left field in a laid off position there, and stays there. So that's really him at the top there. It's clearly left of his hands. What we're going to see on the right hand side here, the club head is much more sort of parallel with his feet. So certainly a more orthodox position. That the issue I would have with that the club's going to tend to get more inside on the way down. Players that get the club overly laid off, the club will stay very much in front of them. So, you know, in David's case, when a better player starts struggling, usually what happens, the club gets too inside coming down through the ball and you block and hook the ball. So to me, that club being a little bit more online and the club more outside his hands, as he now comes down, see how everything stays very much in front of him. He's always had that sort of very aggressive turn of the chest. The head goes early. But if we look at these frames, so definitely to me on the right hand side, the club shaft or club head relative to the hands work more inside, a little bit more closed, only fractionally, much more online at the top. So now as he comes down, now the sequence, arm plane wise, incredibly similar, chest turning, but I would say they're at the same frame about there, one of these two. But look how the club shaft is quite a lot flatter. You know, it's definitely steeper. So they're not my best two lines I've ever drawn on there. But to me, that right hand side, the club face is similar now. And I have a tendency to push or pull draw some. And you know, and as he gets through into the ball, you know, he does a decent job to get the club out in front of him. He's obviously still a great player even in this period. But just to me, on the left-hand side, the club shaft, club head works on a better plane. It's certainly more out in front of him on the left-hand side. You know, initial move, takeaway, club stays in front of him, slightly more open. And then it's a much more laid off, and in the club head stays more in front of him coming down. And then he's always had this look where he sort of then swings aggressively to the left hand side.